right in behind us. Okay. Esainai el heharim me'ain yavo ezri. Esainai el heharim me'ain yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai Oseh shamayim v'haaretz. Ezri me'im Adonai Oseh shamayim v'haaretz. Hayitin lamod raglecha al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo ishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. Al mekomo yavo v'shalom. Keeping with Jewish tradition, we begin with the chanting of a psalm, which we will now translate. Psalm 121, known in Hebrew as Shir LaMa'alot, a song for ascending. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. You see, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your protection, your guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. God will guard your going and coming now and forever. May Harold Rubin go unto God in peace. Hatzur tamim paulo kichol racha mishpat el emunah ve'inav el tzadik v'yashar hu tzadik atah Adonai lahamidu lahachayot asher biyadcha pigadon kol ruchot chalila lecha zichroneinu limchot v'yihiyu na'einecha v'rachamim alenu v'kuchot ki lecha Adon harachamim v'haslichot Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach yehi shem Adonai mevorach V'hu rachum yichaper von v'lo yashchid v'hir ba'al hashiva po v'lo yirkol chamato v'yashov he'afar al ha'reshaya v'aruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher netana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May our beloved soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may God, Adonai, send comfort to those who mourn and grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone who is tuned in to the broadcast of our service who cannot be with us here at the Shaarey Zedek Cemetery but is joining us from all over the world. We've come together here today to honor Harold Rubin, Chaim ben Yisrael Halevi V'Taibel, the son of Israel and Tilly Rubin, Zichronam Livracha, of blessed memory. We are here as family, friends, and a community to show Harold the ultimate respect in Jewish tradition of accompanying him here to his final resting place, and we are here together to say goodbye. Harold passed away Thursday, the 11th day in the Hebrew month of Adar Bet. He was 91. He is survived by his wife Sandra, his sons Charles and Evan, daughter Lisa, daughters-in-law Janice and Susie, and son-in-law Emmanuel. By his grandchildren Tyler, Aaron, Jacob, Zach, and Daniela. By his sister Lily Cohen of Seattle. By his extended family, friends. Harold was predeceased by his parents, Tilly and Israel, by his sister Eva, and by his brother Spike, all of blessed memory, Zichronam Livracha. We will hear eulogies this morning from Charles, Evan, Lisa, and Tyler, as they pay tribute to their dad and Zedek. I offer these words as an introduction. The expression, still waters run deep, feels appropriate for Harold Rubin, at least after the stories I heard from his family when I had the chance to sit with them a few days ago at the Simkin Center, where Harold lived as a resident for the last 4+ years. On the surface, he appeared to be a simple man, quiet, reserved, stoic, unless, of course, he was stirring the pot in a conversation about politics, playing the role of devil's advocate, which sounds like he relished a little too regularly. But there was tremendous depth to Harold Rubin, a depth whose roots trace all the way back to a truly painful and difficult childhood, circumstances well beyond his control. Forced to drop out of school, he never had the chance to go to university. If he had, I'm told, he likely would have been an accountant. He was extremely smart and well-read, particularly about current affairs and politics, and he was especially good with numbers. So we ran a few numbers on Harold. He worked for CNR Accounting for 43 years. For most, if not all of that time, he worked a second job, nights. First at the liquor store, later delivering papers for the Free Press. He was a complaints delivery driver, delivering newspapers to anyone who didn't get their paper that day. After retiring from CNR, Harold switched to a more conventional morning paper route, originally intended, I'm told, as a way of getting exercise. He had that route for 20 years. He and Sandra were married for 64 years. December would have been their 65th anniversary. They were set up. It was a blind date, sort of. After talking on the phone for a bit, they decided to go out. Harold went to the house to pick Sandra up, and after a long, torturous grilling by his future mother-in-law, he took her to a show. She claims she told friends she wanted to marry him after that first date. To hear their family describe it, they were a cliche, bickering like an old married couple. But the love between them was undeniable. I was shown a beautiful picture of them holding hands, walking the halls of Simpkins Center a little over 4 years ago, just before the pandemic. They had 3 kids over the span of 17 years and a total of 5 grandchildren. While the most he may have told his progeny ever directly was, "Good show," he was incredibly proud of them and all of their accomplishments, both personal and career. He regularly boasted about them to friends, neighbors, and the gang who met for coffee at the Garden City Mall and later the Burger King. Because for Harold, or Hal as so many people knew him, or even Al as his misspelled retirement plaque boldly reads, for him it was all about actions, not words. For him it was about the countless rides he offered you to and from the airport. So many rides to his kids and their friends for practices, activities, sports, movies, Jets games, famous Jets autograph sessions at the mall. So many rides that their friends saw him as the cool dad. And when you're taken by your dad to see Saturday Night Fever in the theaters as a 7-year-old, that is pretty cool. You can ask Evan about that. The gestures, the rides, the actions. That's how Harold showed what was his depth. His sense of loyalty, devotion, obligation, and truly love for the people he cared about the most. His family, his mother, his brother. He spoke with his sister on the phone every single night. He took in his nephew Irvin from California and helped raise him. He had distant cousins in the Soviet Union whom he went to bat for with local and federal politicians to get them to Canada, and succeeded in the end. It's also why he cared so much and felt a calling to help those less fortunate. Harold may not have seen himself as a caregiver, but he was. I'm actually not sure how Harold Rubin saw himself. I get the sense he'd probably argue against whatever I said anyway. But I see a man who was dealt a nearly impossible hand early in life, challenge after challenge throughout his life, and that it really beat him down. And yet, I see someone who persevered, who worked tirelessly, who sacrificed, and made it possible for his loving family to become what they have become. They will remember him, everything about him, not just today and not just in the weeks to come, but for years, and the stories they will tell and the honor they will give him. May Harold Rubin's memory be for a blessing, and may he rest in peace. I invite the family to come forward. Charles will offer the eulogy first.
Thank you all for coming and offering your love, support, and condolences. Each message, gesture, hug, or tear has been meaningful and much appreciated by our family. Let me first say that my father would have hated this, absolutely hated it. He never wanted to be the center of attention and always tried to deflect attention to others. He told me repeatedly that he didn't want a funeral and he would throw out the names of people he didn't want mourning him. My response was always the same. I'd say, if you don't want to hear people mourn you, just don't show up. He'd smirk and the conversation would end until the next time. We had our fair share of arguments over the years, but I'm glad I won this one. Maybe he's getting the last laugh by making it a miserably cold day, but either way, Dad, if you're listening, grab a Pepsi and have Baba make you a wurst sandwich. I think it's important that everyone here, including those who knew my father for decades, knows and understands the seminal moment in his life. It explains a lot of what came afterward. June 1943, my father was 10 years old, coming home with his report card on the last day of school. He arrived home to a scene of a lot of cars, a lot of people, and a lot of tears. His father, my grandfather, had been killed in a horrible industrial accident, his body mutilated. He was told not to cry and to be strong. Back then, the body was kept at the house until burial. My father, 10 years old, snuck into the room where his father lay, lifted the sheet, and saw the mutilated body of the person he worshipped. Again, let me repeat, he was 10 years old. He didn't share these details with me until 78 years later. Within a couple years, his 3 siblings were gone, his sisters to the West Coast, and his brother to the military. My father, barely a teenager, was now the man of the house, caring for a mother with severe emotional trauma. Soon after, he would have to leave school to work and support his mother. His devotion to his mother, my Baba, was unwavering and frankly incredible. He spoke to her every single day, often multiple times a day. He took her anywhere she needed to go and was there every Sunday morning to pick up the lunch she made for us. If I had something to tell her, be it about school or sports, chances are he already had. His devotion to his brother Spike was equally unwavering. In his later years, he was Spike's driver, companion, caregiver, and later daily visitor until the end. That seminal moment I spoke of earlier shaped him in so many ways. He was utterly devoted to his family, but again in a quiet and non-emotional way. He took me everywhere I needed to go and picked us up from school every single day without fail. He was my driver for every hockey practice and game, every soccer practice and game, every ski lesson, every birthday party, and later even the first couple of dates I went on. That last one I had to put a stop to. Some things are just too awkward. He was always engaged with my friends and teammates and their parents. I always knew that if I was over at a friend's house, I had at least another 30 to 60 minutes when he came to pick me up, because he'd come inside to talk to my friends' parents. Even longer if it was Sid Ritter. He was never the one to wait in the car for his kids to come out, and he was always at ease talking to people, even complete strangers in the mall or in a restaurant. He had strong opinions, and he was not shy about sharing them. Sometimes I think it was just to see the other person's reaction. He was well-read and enjoyed being provocative or being the contrarian. As the rabbi said, he was also the cool dad who would take my friends and I to R-rated movies that in those days required parental accompaniment. I will never forget him taking me and 4 of my friends to see Slapshot in 1977 when we were 11 and 12 years old. He thought it was just about hockey. He had no idea what was in store and how profane our vocabulary would turn afterwards. Speaking of hockey, he made sure I was able to see as many Jets games as possible in the 1970s. And I'm sure Lisa will allude to this. Anytime there was a possibility of me meeting a Jets player, he'd find a way to make it happen. Losing his father at such a young age shaped his opinions about organized religion. His father was quite religious, and after losing his father, he went in the opposite direction. Yet his actions, I believe, were those of someone who was in fact spiritual. He would honor his father and later his mother and brother by going to synagogue every year on the anniversary of their passing to say prayers for them. He would also find out the exact moment at Yom Kippur for Yizkor, arrive just in time to say it, and leave immediately afterward. As I said, my father was not overly religious, but he made sure that his children had a religious education so that we could decide ourselves what role religion and spirituality would play in our lives. His devotion was such that he worked 2 jobs most of his adult life in order to ensure that he could provide us with a private school education. Between the 3 of us, that's 42 years of private school. Private school, summer camps, sports, and other activities were all possible because of his work ethic and dedication to his family. He'd work at CN from 7 to 3, pick us up from school, eat dinner, and typically be off to a second job by 5:30, arriving home around 10 or 10:30 p.m. He didn't do that for a few years. He did that for decades. My father was always looking to help those in need. He had a strong sense of social justice, no doubt shaped by his past. He often mentioned how there was little support provided for him and his mother. I remember growing up that he was always looking to help those that he saw in need. One example in particular stood out. There was a young man who lived near us in Garden City, who now would be referred to as having special needs. There was little available in the late 70s and 80s, especially for someone like him who was no longer a child. My father would invite him into our house, drive him wherever he needed to go, and sometimes just let him tag along with us. His name was Michael, I recall, but there were others too. There were neighbors he provided with newspapers and, of course, coupons. He loved to deal and loved scouring the newspaper for coupons, which he would cut out and then distribute. With Passover approaching shortly, I want to highlight a passage from the Seder that always reminded me of my father and came to me as I wrote this. As I mentioned, he was not religious, so leading the Seder was my responsibility. He loved horseradish. The more bitter, the better in his mind. It wasn't good enough unless it cleared his sinuses, made him turn red and tear up. In the Passover story, the bitter herbs, or horseradish, represents the bitterness of slavery. Maybe in my father's life, they represented the bitterness of losing his father at such a young age, and so tragically. Either way, after leading the Seder for decades, I've memorized a lot of the passages, and I'd like to offer the following quote. You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless. You shall rejoice before the Lord with your son and daughter, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow in your midst. To many, these are just words on the page before the meal, but I believe that my father's actions embody the spirit behind those words. Now, I never thought I would say COVID was a blessing, but it was for my relationship with my father. His last few years were difficult as dementia gradually took over and engulfed him in its cruel embrace. However, early on he was still verbal and quite often alert and talkative. Those days, when I was the only visitor allowed, we had the deepest and most meaningful conversations of our lives together. He was open, emotional, and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. I will forever cherish those moments. When we got word to come to the Simkin Center this past Thursday, I was able to speak to him and say my goodbyes. I told him I was going to go get my mother and I'd be back. He held on long enough for me to do just that. Then the most incredible thing happened, which I want to share with all of you today. My mother was obviously quite distraught when she came into his room. As much as she tried, all she could say was his name repeatedly. I looked her in the eyes and said, Mom, say what you need to say. Say what you want to say. You won't get another chance. All of a sudden, she started speaking to him, starting from the first time that they met. She spoke for 20 or 30 minutes. I lost track of the time. For that goodbye, it was like she had never had a stroke. It was clear, eloquent, funny at times, and incredibly moving. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard or will hear. More importantly, it was one of the last things my father heard. He was gone in less than 3 hours. What an incredible gift after 64 years of marriage. I want to end with one last story about my father. Every year at Halloween, he'd have us come home and empty our bags. We had to make 2 piles. One for the things that we wanted to keep for ourselves, and one for him to take to Children's Hospital. Actually, there was a 3rd pile. It was the red licorice because he wanted that for himself. But every year, on November 1st, he would go to Children's Hospital to drop off a bag of treats for the kids who couldn't go out to trick or treat. I calculated that from my first Halloween to Lisa's last one, it was likely 22 to 24 years in which hundreds of children were the beneficiaries of his generosity. No one at Children's Hospital knew his name. There was no plaque with his name on it. He wouldn't want that anyways. But there is no higher form of tzedakah, charity, than giving anonymously to someone you will never meet. If anyone here wants to honor my father, perform a random act of kindness to someone you don't know or may never meet. Then do it over and over again like he did, unselfishly and without acknowledgement. His Hebrew name was Chaim. Typically, L'chaim means to life. Today it means both that and to hell. L'chaim.
Okay. So like many conversations I had with my dad after I moved away, I feel I need to start by telling him that the weather is cold but sunny and the price of gas is $1.39.9. As I started to reflect on what I could say about my dad and his life, many memories of the things he did came flooding back to me, whether it was driving me and my friends to a Jets or Bombers game, or waiting in the parking lot of the old St. James McDonald's to pick us up after, taking Baba Rubin and her friends to Eaton's on Saturday, caring for her, and later in life, caring for his brother, my Uncle Spike, handing out gas coupons to friends or strangers, or always making sure his families always had what we needed no matter what his own needs were. He always put others before himself. It didn't matter if somebody he knew or it was a stranger he met having coffee at Garden City Mall or Burger King. He was always there to lend a hand without fail. Expressing his emotions and showing outward affection was difficult for my dad, but doing things for other people, especially those he loved, came so easy for him and was his way of showing that he cared for you and that he loved you. This was just one life lesson that I realized he taught me by his actions. After sharing those stories about him with Rabbi Leibel a few days ago, I came to the realization that for my entire life, my dad had been teaching me life lessons and how to be a good person without ever saying a single word about these things to me. Dad, what an amazing gift you gave me. Dad faced many challenges throughout his life, especially losing his beloved father so tragically when he was just 10 years old. Not being able to continue school past grade 9 because he had to go work to help support my Baba, his mom, working often two jobs to make sure his wife and kids were taken care of, and these last few years his dementia took its horrible toll on his mind and body. But my dad was a living example of a survivor. Sure, he complained about things, especially if it was about any non-NDP government, but to overcome what life dealt him, and not just do what you have to do to move forward and survive, to actually successfully thrive is absolutely remarkable, and that's something that he's going to leave as legacy for everybody. Dad, without realizing it, you taught us all to never give up, no matter how hard life can be. And that's something I've leaned on often, especially as dementia took away the dad that I knew. Although I wouldn't wish dementia on my worst enemy, it crumbled that emotional wall that my dad had protecting him from the pain of all those life challenges, so he could finally show love and let others put him first and finally let us take care of him. Seeing my parents hold hands, say I love you, and shed a tear whenever they said goodbye after a visit at Simpkins Center, along with you letting me give you a shave, brush your hair, helping feed you, are all memories that I will forever hold close to my heart. Dad, you are literally one of the smartest people I know, but you are definitely the most selfless person who helped so many people and left a mark on them. You accomplished so much in life, despite the adversity it threw your way, and you have so much to be proud of. I wish we had more time together, but I feel so lucky to have had you for 44 more years than you got with your dad, my Zedek Rubin. Thank you for being a great dad, a husband, a Zeta, but overall, just a wonderful human being. Dad, you can rest easy now, knowing that from all the jobs you did, the one you did best was be my dad. Good show, Dad. I will miss you every day, and I love you.
How do I sum up 91 years of life? Or at least the 47 I spent with you, my dad. My mom always told me about the day I was born. Mainly that she had to call half the city of Winnipeg to find my father to tell him he had a baby girl. Well, initially, I was upset to hear he was the last to know I was born. He had a good reason, taking my brothers to get the autographs of the Winnipeg Jets at Garden City. That was my dad. Always there for his family, even when it didn't seem like he was. He would be on the sidelines eating seeds at Evans football games, hoisting me up to see my big brother play. He would sweat in June in the non-air-conditioned Playhouse Theater and shoot the breeze with security until he knew it was time to see his little girl dance on stage. He would tell anyone who would listen how his son Charles... Did you know his son Charles graduated from dental school and he got the gold medal? He may not have been the dad to color with his kids or play down in the dirt, but he would always show up, even if my mom had to call all my aunt's uncles and his friends to find him at Burger King or Sid Manook's garage fixing his cars. Sorry. My dad taught me that family comes first. He always made sure his wife and kids had what we needed to succeed, not just financially, but by modeling hard work, kindness to strangers, and challenging the news we get fed. My dad was a quiet man with beautiful blue eyes that were able to absorb knowledge and people all around him. He taught me how to order a Burger King burger, extra hot and extra onions, so it actually tasted better. He taught me how to drive essentially what were couches on wheels with his Buicks and Chevys. And while his name may not be on buildings, he taught me tzedakah and tikkun olam, what it really means. Helping others can be as simple as sharing your knowledge or time. He taught me the joy you feel when your dance partner spins you, and the relief when they catch you. Dad, you always spun me so fast so that I can twirl and shine, but knew exactly when to grab me before I fell. You let me go off to study in BC knowing I was going there to stay, but whenever I stumbled on my footwork, you were ever the reliable dance partner to pick me up. So, Dad, save a dance for your doll. Until we meet again, Ba'olam haba. I love you always, Daddy, and forever will be your doll.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. Today I speak on behalf of all the grandchildren, myself, Aaron, Jacob, Zach, and Daniela, as we remember the life our Zeta lived. Growing up, Zeta was a big part of our lives. Him and Baba would often take Aaron and I out for lunch, and then we'd go do something fun, usually either bowling at Academy Lanes or mini golf at the Golf Dome. On special occasions, we got to have sleepovers in their house on Daffodil. We got to play at the park at the end of their street, with their old toys in their basement, see their pet turtles, and of course, laugh when Zeta fell asleep on the couch after we had tired him out. Zeta always came to Aaron's dance recitals, and despite the long drive across the city, he was at most of my hockey games too. I was always extra motivated when he was in the crowd because Bob and Zeta would give me a loonie for every goal and assist I got. And Zeta is responsible for the greatest hockey memory of my life. When I was 9 years old, my mom received a call from the Manitoba Moose saying that I had won the Hockey Dream of a Lifetime contest. As part of the contest, I essentially got to join the Manitoba Moose for a day, touring the brand new MTS Center. Touring the brand new MTS Center, signing a contract with the team, and taking part in practice. But none of us could understand it. We were all very confused. We didn't enter my name into any contest. We later learned that during his daily read of the newspapers from front to back, Zeta had seen this contest and entered my name. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that he had filled out entries for dozens of contests over the years and entered the names of his grandchildren if they thought they would enjoy the prize. It was through these kinds of actions that Zeta showed his love for his family. And so that day, Zeta was in the crowd as I took part in practice with Ryan Kessler and Kevin Bieksa and dropped the gloves with Jimmy Roy. It's a day I will never forget, and it happened because Zeta was always thinking about me and his grandchildren. Jacob wanted me to add that he will always remember everything he did with Zeta. This included all the time spent together at the Children's Museum, walks around Daffodil Street, as well as all the restaurants he went to as a family. And he will fondly remember all the times Zeta came to Vancouver to visit, especially when Zeta came to Jacob's bar mitzvah 5 years ago. It was very special. In the last several years, life has been really difficult for Zeta as he's battled dementia. And I know that traveling to Jacob's bar mitzvah was a really difficult trip for him due to his mental state. But I caught glimpses. I caught glimpses of him beaming with pride at Jacob's accomplishment, and I caught glimpses of him being there with his children, his grandchildren, his sister and nieces and nephew from Seattle, and how happy he was to be with them. I know Zeta will continue to be proud of everything his family and his children and his grandchildren accomplish. Anytime I talked to Zeta, there was always a list of questions he would ask. Where did you park the car? Were you able to find parking okay? Do you think there's going to be a recession? What's the price of gas? Should the Jets fire their coach? Should the Bombers fire their coach? And he'd always, ahead of a big game, ask me to pick which team I thought was going to win, and without fail, he would pick the opposite team. But today, I want to answer some of these questions for him one more time. No, I don't think there's going to be a recession. No, I don't think the Jets or the Bombers should fire their coach. But yes, we love you, Zeta, and we will miss you so very much.
Thank you, Charles, Evan, Lisa, Tyler. Tremendous, beautiful, heartfelt family eulogies to honor Harold Rubin. I'll now chant the El Malei Rachamim, the traditional Jewish memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim Uteorim Gezohar Arakia Mazhirim Enishmat Chaim Ben Yisrael Halevi V'Taibol Shalach Leolamo Began Eidente Menuchato Anabal Harachamim Hasti reu v'seiter kenafecha leolamim Utzror bitzror achayim enishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo b'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Harold Rubin, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that he find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And together let us say, Amen. Thank you again to everyone for coming on a cold day, and to everyone for tuning in if you couldn't be here with us. We can encourage you to continue to reach out to the family, send your messages, phone calls, texts, emails, to continue to help them through this difficult time as they've now entered into the world of grief and mourning. In keeping with that, there will be a meal of consolation after this service at Ray and Jerry's. Everyone is invited to attend and continue sharing stories of how Harold touched their lives, and also to bring comfort to his family. We say to his family, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort and console you among all those who are or who have ever been in mourning in our community. There will also be a night of Shiva this evening from 7 to 9 at Chuck and Janice's home, 616 Holland Boulevard. There will be davening, there will be prayers at 7:30. And that's just for this evening again. In a moment, we will recite together the words of the mourner's Kaddish, and then the family will lead us in the closing and familiar ritual of shoveling earth into the grave. After the family goes, everyone here in attendance is invited to participate. There are multiple shovels so people can come from both sides. We say it even though it's obvious, it's very icy, so please tread carefully. When it comes to shoveling, most people pour 3 shovelfuls of earth. There are different customs, though, in different Jewish cemeteries around the world. Some people use the front of the shovel. Some people use the back of the shovel. Some people will return the shovel when they're done to the pile of earth. Others will pass it to the next person in line. Whatever the custom with which you're familiar is the one you should embrace. And if you want to participate but are unsure of using one of the large shovels, you may not be able to see it, but just in front of me, right next to this matzeva, the headstone, there is a pail with sand and a small shovel in it, so anyone can participate in this very powerful ritual. It ties into the comments I made in the opening, that in Jewish tradition we believe to accompany someone to his final resting place is the highest form of respect we can show. A family member, a friend, anyone in our community. And we do this by burying people with our own hands. Hands that once held their hands. We take on the responsibility of caring for them till the very end. Something that truly resonated with Harold and how he lived his life, caring for others. So again, the family will lead us, and then everyone is invited to participate as well. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevorach. These are the words of Job, the epitome of suffering in our tradition, who said, God you have given, God you have taken away, blessed be the name of God. May the memory of Harold Rubin be a blessing, as we mark that his essence will never leave the hearts and souls that he touched throughout his life. We'll now recite the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabah. Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabah mevorach le'alam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabah Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony on high bring peace and harmony to us, to all Israel, and to all humanity, as again we say, Amen. Again, thank you for coming together to honor Harold and support his family. I invite his family to go forward.